Probably your most famous and influential piece of work is the article Two Dogmas of Empiricism, published in 1951. Could you say what the main theses are of this paper and why you think it was found to be so revolutionary?
Yes. When I gave that lecture, which a month later appeared as a paper in the Philosophical Review, I had no conception that it was going to be such a that it was going to bring such a widespread and voluminous response. I had written it and prepared my lecture only on request. It was an assignment. I had, how many years earlier? About 1940. So 10, 11 years earlier, had come quite definitely to the conclusion that Carnap's dichotomy between empirical knowledge and what he called analytic truth, which was just a matter of verbal conventions, that this was itself an unempirical and ill-defined or undefined dichotomy, and that the contribution of convention, unconscious convention, incidentally, which had seemed to me rather a contradiction in terms, between what you might put down to the meanings of the words, what's true by virtue of the meanings of the words in the sentence, and on the other hand, what's true in view of scientific discoveries, empirical discoveries, was a misconception, and that there's, in general, a contribution from both sides in just about everything we say. Finally get down to pure logic, and then you've got something which surely is acquired through learning the logical words, the grammatical particles, and, or, and, etc., which are governed by laws of logical inference.
The title of the paper refers to two dogmas of empiricism, and presumably one of them is the point you just, the assumption that there is a strict distinction between what is known on the basis of experience, or what is true in virtue of the empirical facts, and what is true simply as a matter of definition or convention. What is the other dogma? What is the relationship between the two dogmas?
The other dogma, the notion that our knowledge was, in that paper, it came in as speculatively as one possible reason for people being so convinced convinced of the dichotomy between analytic and synthetic statements. I've been groping for a reason why that seemed so fundamental. Yes, reductionism was the word I used, and that all our empirical concepts about the nature of physical objects and the rest, could be reduced by definition, or at least linguistic convention, somewhat short of definition, to sensory input. And what I was pushing instead is a holism, the sort of thing that had been urged a couple of decades before by Pierre Duhem, according to which such reduction is not to be hoped for.
Your idea was that once reductionism has been done away with and replaced with holism, then there isn't the need, that positivist thought, to draw a distinction between analytic and synthetic truths, or truths of fact and truths of meaning.
Yes, that was part of the argument. more of the argument against analyticity consisted in my trotting out some of the familiar characterizations, true by virtue of the meanings of the words as one characterization, one definition, and a vaguer one, true by necessity, true by virtue of definitions. And I argued that these were not helpful because they were subject to the same doubts as the notion of analyticity itself. And so having dismissed those, and then also having dismissed this, as I suppose, further likely source of the first dogma, namely the dogma of reductionism, that combination was my argument. But as I think back on it, I wasn't persuaded even then that I had disproved the possibility of a satisfactory notion of analyticity. I was questioning what is it, and maintaining that we had never been told.
I see. This skepticism about the notion of analyticity, about the idea that some sentences are true solely in virtue of what they mean, extends to a more general skepticism about the notion of meaning and concepts related to the notion of meaning, such as definition, the idea of one word being synonymous with another word. Was your position then that it's simply an illusion that words have meanings and that sometimes two words have the same meaning? And if so, how do you reconcile this fairly extreme skepticism with your own evident fascination with language and with the meanings of words?
Good, yes. I wouldn't have said that words don't have meanings, but rather, or that words never have, always have different meanings or never have the same meanings. Rather, I would say that I can't make adequate sense even of those sentences because I'm challenging the notion of meaning. Yes, I think even back at that time, I was seeing this problem of meaning as the same as the problem of analyticity, because one of the ways of defining analyticity was that an analytic sentence was equivalent to or had the same meaning as a tautology, 0 equals 0. You could define, there's one of the ways of defining one of these concepts in terms of another, in this case, sameness of meaning. What was worrying me, early and late, especially later, getting on towards word and object, was the notion of sameness of meaning. And that's what I was challenging. And I argued that to challenge the notion of sameness of meaning is to challenge the notion of meaning. That is to say, the notion of the meaning of an expression. Because there's no entity without identity. You haven't you've made sense of some alleged object or category of objects, except insofar as you've explained it's a criterion for deciding when you have two of them and when just one. When are they the same? When are they different? If you can't say when meanings are the same, you haven't said what meanings are. Now I'm stressing the plural of meaning because I'm not and never was rejecting semantics and the semantical side of linguistics. I couldn't bear to. So we are engaged, and semanticists and lexicographers are engaged in the study of meaning and the meaning of language and the meaning of sentences. Here, however, I'm using the word meaning not as a distributive term, but I'm using it as a mass term, like water, like sugar, meaning of language, meaning of things, but not meanings of anything.